Tracy Fouch, and I'm just a panelist. I don't work here, but
We do not pay her.
I hope I provide some good insight anyway.
I'm Chris Miller. I'm an FSL student.
All right, with introductions out of the way, let's get on to our first question. And panelists, be ready for this. So, how would you describe the difference between autism awareness versus autism acceptance? Raise your hands if you want to answer this question. Okay, so we got two. Anyone else? Okay, Dolls, you up first.
It's over here. I would describe the difference between autism awareness versus autism acceptance with the fact that almost everybody knows what autism is, but they don't completely understand the intricacies that come with it. So they have ideas in their head about what an autistic person looks like, and then they end up being wrong because they think that they know everything. All right.
So when it comes to autism awareness versus autism acceptance, I think Dolly definitely has the right idea, but I also wanted to add, I guess, awareness. My mind is blank, sorry.
You're on the
So,
spot, I must have- My mind is still blanking, sorry.
okay, awareness is sort of, it's kind of a cop-out in a way. Like, when someone participates, or not participates, when someone acknowledges an autism awareness movement, that's not really, it's kind of just a way to claim you care without actually putting in the effort to understand the autistic community. It's like,
Look at me.
yeah. Like, a lot of autism awareness movements are not run by autistic people, they do not consult autistic people, and they have a lot of misconceptions about autistic people, so you probably shouldn't be going to those people if you want to learn about autistic people. Like, I guess, acceptance, it's definitely just like making an effort to understand autistic people and find out how you can help them feel more comfortable, help them feel more accepted, and I think that's definitely a better direction to go than just, you exist.
And I know it.
Okay, before moving on, do we have any other panelists that would like to speak? Suja?
For me, the difference between awareness and acceptance is life is hard. No one has all the time in the world to know and understand and accept every single thing. Sometimes the best we can do is be aware. And until we meet someone with autism, we can't really accept it. Just like you can be aware that something is there, you never really accept it. It can be malicious, but in my experience, it's mostly benign. Not because someone is hateful or wants to make use of someone or the autistic movement. They just don't have the time, and they haven't met enough autistic people to truly grasp what it means and accept it. And I feel like the more we involve ourselves with the community, the more we reach out, the more we help people understand who we are and what it means for us to be autistic, the more people will be able to accept it.
Alright, and make sure no one else has anything to add. We good?
Can I just ask a question for awareness, going back to school-age kids?
You may.
How should teachers and those who staff, what should we learn? How can we learn if we are not made aware at an early age of a person's autism?
Anyone on the panel want to answer this question?
I think I might have an understanding of what you're asking.
Okay, Dolly?
So if I understand the question properly, you're saying what can teachers do to be made more aware?
Because, kids come to us young, and what can we learn to be aware?
I best way for teachers to learn is by having programs in schools that can train teachers, like we have at Austin P for teachers to understand how to handle students with disabilities and their accommodations. And so programs put in place that can benefit teachers will also benefit students in the end as well.
Okay, Rosie?
I did wanna add onto that, cause I think you mentioned like, how can we be more accommodating if we are not aware of their disability, like they haven't been diagnosed, and I think just offering these accommodations to anyone who would need it is a good step, because these accommodations, they're not like going to give anyone an advantage. If someone feels like they need it, it's probably because they need it. So just offering that to them, and then they'll come to you.
CJ, would you like to say? Alright, that's Michael.
I would like to agree, but sometimes resources are finite. People are finite, what we can do is fucking finite, and giving it to everyone is good in theory, but hard. Because there's only so many teachers, so many advocates, there's only so much time. And I'm gonna ask the audience something. Show of hands, who knows what an ungulate is?
Woo, congratulations.
Who knows what a deer is? They're the same thing. The DSM-5 is important for us in the scientific community because it allows us to say, this is what you should look for. But when you're addressing a person, you shouldn't use that language. The DSM-5 is for documentation, finding connections.
Sometimes.
But when you're
just
talking to
finding
people, you don't say you saw an ungulate, you saw a deer.
Yep.
You don't see someone who has these symptoms. You see a person with autism, their identity. So I believe that if it were me, I would rely on the DSM-5 to look for indications and then connect with them using identity.
Okay, and I will preface this, I'm not trying to deny the audience to speak, but I will take one more question before we get back to the panelists. I do apologize. We will have time at the end for the audience to ask questions.
And this
Is
question
there-
is kind of discussed later on as well.
Yes, it's, I'm sorry, it's like we are kind of jumping, but for now, call the questions, I'm sorry. I did not mean to do so. I mean, like, take one first.
We will come back to you.
It wasn't a question, it was more of an add-on to what she
That's
had.
what I was gonna do, so.
Okay.
Yeah, it was just add-ons.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I was like, look, but now as we continue, question 2, what are misconceptions about autism that awareness campaigns might get wrong? Who wants to answer this? We got Donovan, we got Ricky, and we got Owen. Okay, so first we'll go down with Owen.
No, really.
Oh,
That's not my
What?
name.
no.
Me?
No, I said
Owen.
Owen. I said Owen.
Have a mic.
Oh. Okay.
We're fine, everything's fine.
Okay, so for me, I'm gonna go ahead and say this aloud. I am not someone who's in social media a lot, so I do not understand a lot about what the autism awareness campaigns advocate a lot. I was homeschooled for a large portion of my life, very under a rock, but I do know that despite being that, I'm aware that there's a lot of campaigns that either preface those with autism to be incredibly smart and then really stupid in some other areas, or to just be challenged and be really sweet. That is true, but at the same time, just because you're autistic doesn't mean you're a super genius. And a lot of the times as well, people, when they find out you're autistic, will say, what can you do? What's your special gift? What is something that, I know, it sounds weird. What is your special ability? Yeah, your superpower. And not everybody with autism has something that makes them better than everybody else. We're different, and I feel like a lot of the autism awareness campaigns out there try to put us as something that we are either an evolution or a de-evolution from neurotypicals. We're really just, we're slightly different than y'all, but not superpowered and not inept. So,
That was good.
Who else has something to say? Dolly?
Thank you. I can answer this question with examples. The biggest example that a lot of people are aware of is Autism Speaks and the way that they represent people with autism. One of the ways they said to help an autistic person cope with a meltdown is to physically restrain them. I'm pretty sure we can all agree that that is not a good idea. Things like that, also saying that autism is a disease against the parents, making people feel ashamed for their identity and the diagnosis that they have been given. Things like that, a lot of autism campaigns can get wrong because they don't focus on autistic voices, they focus on the voices of parents or people who think they know what autism is and don't really understand it.
What on Gracie?
So a lot of what I was thinking was sort of echoed by my fellow panelists, but I did also want to add
How do I get on the pen?
that, sorry, sorry. I did want to add that these campaigns sort of just fundamentally misunderstand
She's sitting down
autism
there on the end.
because they are not typically run by people who are autistic, and even those who do know autistic people who run these things they definitely don't understand their autistic loved ones, and they sort of see them as like this tragedy or this superhero. Like, it's definitely a matter of either demonizing them or romanticizing them, like as something like more or less than human, I guess, in a way, when in reality it's just differences. It's not good or bad, it's just different.
Anyone else have anything to add for as well? Alright. Well, let us move on.
You're under pressure, I understand.
So how have these misconceptions affected your experience in college and feeling accepted? Who anything else wants to answer? Okay, we got Bruno. Anyone else besides Bruno? Okay, all right. Anyone else? Just make sure. Okay, Bruno, you have the floor.
Well, one misconception that, especially in the more recent years that I've been here, that I've been back and forth with people on again and again, is we actually addressed this a little bit, but I'm gonna go further into it. It was addressed in the slide when the claim was made, we're all on the spectrum and we are all autistic, and there may be a divide in opinions on that, but I have always said to people, it is something you either have or you do not, because in such a way, because there is a variation in the brains of a neurotypical versus someone who does have autism. It would be difficult for me to believe that everyone has the phrase that was used, a piece of it.
Alright, moving on to Zoe.
I don't have too much to say on this, but one misconception I run into a lot is the you don't look autistic.
no,
I run into that a lot because of the things that I am capable of, and people don't see what I'm not capable of because I don't outwardly show it. And I think that's really frustrating for me because it does invalidate the things that I struggle with.
I will say amen to the one about not looking autistic.
yes.
Been there, done that. But anyway, anyone else have anything to add? Owen, you have the floor.
Little bit of a side note. Yes, I realize that. So one thing that I have noticed is that there is a large diversity of us here at the college, different areas of the spectrum for all of us. And I find it difficult to work with the fact that neurotypicals, while they are aware of the fact that there is a spectrum, they think that there are certain areas of the spectrum that are better than others. And like, just because, like, as you said, just because we may not act autistic in that neurotypical's mindset doesn't mean that we are more fortunate than other people or less fortunate than other people. We all have strengths and weaknesses that come with our autism, and I find it a little upsetting sometimes that just because I don't physically look like I have autism,
What's the look?
what is the look? That is a good point. Because I don't seem to display it as much as other people, that mentally I have it, but people will kind of put it to the side as kind of a subcategory. That doesn't quite make great sense, but if you get what I'm saying, you get it. I feel like I'm going on a rant, so I'm gonna stop now.
Anyone else want to move on to the next question? Alrighty, let's keep this train going. Okay, so what role do you think the media plays in shaping perception of autism awareness and acceptance? I know we talked about this a few times, but is there anything the parents would like to add more on this subject? I see 3 hands. Going down the line, Bruno, you're first.
The role that I see it playing is that a lot of times I see media, not just in this, but in a lot of areas. But on this matter, I see media as the role as a bit of distortion of the truth, is what I see. The media is what I would call a very, very complicated game of telephone. Things will get misconstrued the more it is passed on.
Alright, Donna, you're up next.
All right. I just keep taking this mic over and over again. I think the role that media plays in the perception of autism is the same as the person who says, well, I have an autistic nephew and you don't act anything like him. I'm really tired of hearing that I don't act like Sheldon Cooper. It's driving me crazy.
I did the opposite, and it drives me crazy.
Yeah, Bazinga!
Bazinga.
But that's pretty much all I had to say about that one, but I am not Sheldon Cooper.
Moving on to Gracie.
So my sentiment is kind of similar to Dolly's, where I feel like it's in terms of like the media and how it portrays autism, it's a lot of people's main exposure to autistic people. Like, they don't know any autistic people in real life, or if they do, they don't really take the time to get to know them. They just kind of see them, or they don't even know that they're autistic.
Or believe it.
So if the media gets it wrong, then that can really hurt the perception of autism overall, because like people are completely misinformed about what it is and how it affects people and just what you should treat it like and how you should treat autistic people. So we definitely need to try and be aware that the media doesn't always get it right, and you should definitely look at everything you see on it with a critical eye, and you should listen to people in that community rather than just taking Sheldon Cooper's word for it, I guess.
Did you know he's not actually autistic? Everyone thinks he is, but he's actually not.
Anyone else want to speak on this?
I'll have them all. For me, it was not Sheldon Cooper for me. It was always Spock.
Yeah.
How many Star Trek fans we got in the house?
Woo! Yay!
Star Wars better.
Way in
Long
there.
and prosper.
Long and prosper.
Alright,
Peace and long life.
So one thing I would like to add, media-wise, the majority of media comes to terms with a lot of things. So that a lot of people will all agree on how people with autism display things. And right, the really popular forms of autism out there is of people who are autistic are displayed in shows like Sheldon Cooper, Spock. I've heard a lot of people compare me to
Good doctor.
Mark Finkel or Marcus or something like that. Something from like Boy Meets World or something.
Farkle.
Farkle. Thank
What a
you.
name.
Minkus and Farkle, that's what it was.
What a name.
No clue what those are, but apparently
Farkle
that's-
is based off a board game, and Minkus is based off a type of animal found in Russia.
Got it.
Trivia.
But just because of the overall like autism people out there in the world that have already been kind of like portrayed in movies, and as well the people in the people in these movies and these social media settings making jokes or humor about themselves or about the autistic community because they're autistic, I feel like that really has a negative impact on everybody else believing that autistic people are okay with being stereotyped as something or having jokes made about them in some manner. It bothers me a lot. And I feel like the media makes it worse and worse and worse. I don't feel like it helps a lot because in a giant game of telephone, one good word could be said, but then a bunch of things could be added onto that one good word and suddenly it's lost all its meaning. So,
All right, I feel like that's a good place to move on. So, let us move on to the next question. How has stemming and other autistic behaviors affected people's willingness to accept you? Any volunteers to say this? Gracie, I guess you're the one.
Just me? Okay.
Yes.
So, the way I think it affects people's acceptance of autistic people and I guess autistic individuals, it sort of goes hand in hand with like autistic individuals' acceptance of themselves. I think it's sort of like a domino effect where someone might stim in a public place and then they get looks and then it just shatters their confidence. They want to hide away. They don't want to feel different. So they just suppress everything autistic. And so neurotypical people, they see that. They just see it as weird. And then when they stop showing it, they stop seeing it. So they never learn to normalize it. So it's a domino effect again, where just one little thing, one little microaggression can just spiral.
Very nice, you have your hand raised.
About Simi, I'll actually tell you a story. It was.
Keep it brief.
You know what?
Keep it brief.
Of course. It was in high school, and one day I was stemming, and how I was doing it was, I just had a pen and I was twisting it through my fingers pretty quickly, and things like that. I would show you, but I don't have a pen with me. Oh, thanks. I was doing this
Oh, that's cool.
a lot.
Oh, wow.
That is impressive.
Like I'm way past my prime. I can't do it as well as I used to. But anyway, a lot of people had seen it while I was in class, and they were like, "Bruno, what are you doing?" I said, "None." And they saw that I was looking at a paper. I wasn't even looking at it. So just like that, in a very, very short amount of time, stemming became a carnival trick. I was okay with.
I can do a swift one. I don't know, I have yet to identify like stimming behaviors I have a lot, but I do know one of the autistic behaviors that I struggle with a lot is being able to detect paraverbal language. To sum it up, sarcasm and
What is
metaphorical
that?
language. I take everything stupidly literally.
Yep.
And when somebody tells me something, like an example today was in the library when a friend of mine said I was wanting to stay behind on a project and work on a project, and a friend of mine goes, that's really responsible. And I could not read the tone of voice because her body language that I been in therapy to read, her body language said one thing, and her voice, what she said, literally meant something else to me, and I couldn't pick up on that paraverbal. That is she being sarcastic or literal right now? And I have to ask. I have to ask so often, hey, I can't tell if you're being serious or if that's sarcastic.
That's how most people find out about autism.
It's, yeah, that's my biggest giveaway. And the fact is that because of that, I find a lot of times that neurotypicals do not use humor around this that much, or they don't give us that much chance to try to understand it. They think because we don't get the joke that it's not worth them explaining, or that we don't get why they're doing it, it's not worth it explaining. I think that is very frustrating, and it makes you miss out on a lot of conversations you could have, or a lot of things you don't understand because they said it in a sarcastic manner and they won't elaborate on it. And you don't even realize if it's sarcasm. So.
Alright, CJ, you have something to add?
Sorry.
Just talk really loud.
When I was younger, I was much the same. It took me a long time to learn social cues, sarcasm, and I had to learn it in a different way than other people did. Self-taught. And again, that's one big thing with autism. What works for me may not work for, Dolly or Owen. So each one has their own way of learning, their way of interpreting. So I feel like that is one of the biggest challenges that people with autism do face, is learning themselves. Because until they know who they are, it's very hard for them to tell you who they are, and even harder for them to get proper help. But masking delays that process by potentially years. Someone could mask most of their life, and by the time they take their mask off, they don't know who they are or where to even start. And I just wanted to point that out because it is a very common and very scary thing.
Took 7 years of therapy for me.
We'll have Casey take the mic real quick.
I just wanted to add that a lot of folks think that autistic people just cannot quote read nonverbal cues. Some autistic people like myself are hyper vigilant to other people's facial expressions. So I often, I have worked to deal with this and but reading other people's facial expressions can cause a lot of rejection sensitivity for some autistic people because it feels like their facial expression looks mad at you, but that's just like a facial expression, I guess, that they have. One thing I wish that it would be really helpful to some autistic people, including myself, is for just people to be more direct about what they're thinking so that you don't have to guess what they're thinking from their facial expression and spend days worrying about whether they're upset with you, and because oftentimes they just won't tell you if they are, or if they are seeking something from you that they're not getting. So being more direct in communication would help a lot of autistic people.
I would love to second that if I can real fast.
Third.
I would say we continue, but let's move on to another question. I'm sorry, but we have been spending a big time on this question.
Yeah.
So let's move on. If someone who does not understand your autism, how would you want them to express that so you can educate them? Okay, so we got Drew. Bruno, you're first.
Thank you so much.
Well, simply say the phrase. Thank you, sir. Simply say, if I had explained something to you or made an attempt to explain it to you and you don't understand, I would rather you just say, hey, I'm not really following you. I don't really understand what you just told me, and then we'll find another way to reach the common ground and reach the level of understanding.
Anyone else want to take this? Nolly?
Thank you. My favorite thing ever is when people ask me questions. I love answering questions. So I try my best to interject that I have autism when I meet someone some way, somehow, so that way they can understand, if they don't already, why I might act a little bit differently than they do. And so after that, if they have follow-up questions, I'm like, yes, thank you so much. I want to tell you so many things about myself. And so that usually helps out a lot when I get to know somebody.
Rosie, do you want to speak or are you good?
Yeah,
Alright.
I think when it comes to like, you know, the prompt, but it's like a lot of that sort of comes up naturally, I've found, assuming they're aware that you are autistic, of course. I'm not very good about informing people. I'm still not quite confident enough, but a lot of times it's sort of like, it just kind of comes up like when it's relevant, like I guess say, for example, the trouble with sarcasm, it's sort of just when you don't understand it, you bring that up, and then they're like, oh, is that how that works? And then you explain that, basically.
Alright, in order to save some time, we're about to lightning round this.
Alright,
So let's move on to this question. How can the university better support students with autism beyond just sharing or just raising awareness? Who wants to speak on that? I'll take the first three. So we got Dollar, anyone else want to speak? Rosie? Anyone else? Alright, and you. Dollar first.
Here I go. So I would say that AutismTN leads a really good example on this, both by having programs for autistic people to feel comfortable in and reach accommodations with, and then also giving them places to speak their voices. So things like this, events like this, being hosted at schools, I think is really important. So I think AutismTN does a really good job. Yippee!
Yeah. Seconded, but also I think there are definitely still areas that can be improved upon. Like, I think this was mentioned in the last panel, but providing, I guess, more autism-friendly environments in the university would definitely be a good step in the right direction. Like maybe having STEM toys in some areas of the building, like the Writing Center has fidget toys, and that's always nice to have. So in more areas, stuff like fidget toys and I guess like quieter places, better sensory environments, maybe more comfortable seating, because I know for a lot of autistic people, it's like if the seats, if it's like a scratchy seat or something, you're not going to be able to pay attention to anything else but that texture because it's just so unbearable. So I guess just having a more sensory friendly environment in general.
TA, would you like to add or are you good?
As someone with autism, this is my experience. A bad user interface can shut down my brain. If your user interface, regardless of how important the information is confusing, if it's asking me to jump through hoops, my brain just turns off. And AutismTN does have some outdated user interfaces, and it could most certainly do with a neurodivergent friendly introduction to college and all the resources where you aren't digging through paper after paper after paper, hunting down, go to that location, talk to that guy, go over there, talk to that guy, and but there at this time though, if you miss it, you may have to go somewhere else. Yeah, that would definitely be my big thing that I would recommend.
Alright, let's move on to this question because I really want to hear this. Now, I know we discussed facets about this, but let me ask. Overall, do you feel AutismTN promotes an accepting environment? Who wants to take this? We got Ollie, who's the second, Bruno, and Gracie. So, Bruno, you're first.
Yes.
Okay, short and sweet. Ollie.
Yes. I will say, I'll add a little bit more. I would say that AutismTN definitely helps me feel accepted, and I was in FSL my freshman year due to a friend who was also part of the program who invited me. And that's the main reason I even went to the school to begin with, was because it was the only one locally that had a program that I could feel accepted in and get the help that I knew I needed. And so ever since then, college has been a breeze, I think. Way better than high school was. Hated high school.
Seconded, and I also wanted to add, just, like, FSL as a program, and just, like, I honestly don't know what I would do if I didn't have it. I feel like I would be struggling so much, even with SDRC, I feel like autistic people have very special, or not special needs, that's a very, no, not that, no. Very specific accommodations that they might need that might not always be able to be provided by SDRC. They need more specific resources, like, I guess, the accountability meetings. Sometimes we have trouble holding ourselves accountable.
The mentorship.
Yeah,
Definitely help.
yeah, definitely just more guidance and more assistance in certain areas, because we do struggle to navigate a neurotypical environment, and a lot of college is sort of like, it's like a gateway into the adult world, so making sure you understand like how to best fit into that without like disregarding your own needs is very important, and it's very, very, very good that Austin P has a program like this.
Indeed it does, indeed it does. Now, I open the floor to the audience here. Yes, I do have a question for you. So, again, the question to the audience, how has your upbringing and community affected your perception of autism? I'll take hands.
Can you repeat the question?
Oh, sorry. How has your upbringing and community affected your perception of autism? Nothing.
Okay, so for me, it was a little bit more different. I didn't really have a support group. The only person I had was my mother, and she did everything she can, take me to my doctor's appointments, therapy sessions. I've been on every medication. And because of that, I had a hard time connecting in social environments. Like, my mom would always tell me go out there and make some friends. So I would follow my older brothers and try to connect with their friends, and I'll put on their masks and try to pick up their personas, and it became a long cycle that I continuously started doing. I recently started to figure out ways to unmask myself and actually learn how to be myself. So for me, it was very difficult to engage in any type of community activity, so I became introverted and stayed to myself. Does that answer your question in a way?
I mean, yes, I've shared some experience like that myself. I was actually a very introverted person before I became the very extrovert you see before me. Good for you. But anyway, Jackson, I see your hand.
Because I didn't really have much trouble in terms of my upbringing. Again, white male, upper middle class. So what I really just grew up on was just the fact that I was just considered one of the gifted kids, and I was somewhat proud of that. But by the time I got diagnosed in around the 7th grade, my parents were just like, oh yeah, that makes sense. And that was just basically it. It was just something I had, and not really much changed.
Would anyone else like to speak up? Or all right, good. We got a hand.
I kind of agree with you.